Welcome to Fire Smart Landscaping 101, an introductory course to help landscape professionals better understand how to make our gardens more fire resistant. My name is Rich Shortall, Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. Let's begin with a short video about Wildfire.
In the western United States, I believe something like 5 or 6 states within the last 10 years have had the largest wildfires they've ever had on record. Fires which exceed any of the kind of previous experience we've had with the size, intensity, ferocity of fires up until this last decade or so. What's going on in the background of all of this is you have climate change, which is constantly pushing the conditions to be drier, the fuels to be drier, the weather to be more extreme.
You can feel the heat.
There just simply aren't enough firefighters to help fight this fire because of the sheer number of fires and also the size.
We're seeing large fires in landscapes born and bred of fire now being destroyed by fire.
As we learned in the video, wildfires have always been a part of California, but recently we've had more fires and they've been more destructive than ever before. It is important for you as landscape professionals to understand how these wildfires are causing homes to burn. After completing this course, you will have the knowledge to teach homeowners how to make their property more resistant to wildfire. Your landscaping skills are critical to maintain and create fire-smart garden landscapes. Let's talk about the goals of the program. First, we want to learn about wildfire behavior. Next, we want to know how to create defensible space to protect our homes. We'd like to create beautiful, fire-smart landscaping. And perhaps most important, we want to learn how to maintain landscape to reduce the risk of wildfire. What can we expect from the program? We have 3 short videos. The first one explores how wildfires behave. The second one teaches us how to create defensible space. And finally, best practices for planting and maintaining a fire-smart landscape. Each of these videos is followed by some questions which test your understanding and activities to help you apply what you learned. It only takes about an hour to complete. At the end of it, you'll have a certificate of successful completion. Our first video covers wildfire science. The narrator is Battalion Chief Todd Lando from the Central Marin Fire Department. Let's hear what Todd has to say.
Wildfires are a natural event. A long time ago in California, wildfires were often started by lightning, igniting dry leaves and underbrush in the forests. There were lots of wildfires, but they weren't very destructive because there wasn't as much fuel to burn on the forest floor. Regular fires do the hard cleanup work for us. Native Americans understood that forests were healthier if they experienced lots of small fires, which burned dead wood and debris on the forest floor. They would even set fires to encourage this healthy cycle. This helped large trees stay healthy, made it easier for the native people to hunt and grow food. For the last 100 years or so, we've been putting out wildfires because we were worried that fires were dangerous to people. At first, fighting fires was easy because the forests were clean from years of natural fires. But over time, our forests have suffered. When small fires are not allowed to burn, dead wood and other flammable debris builds up. Now when fires start, they become much bigger and spread fast because the fire has a lot of dry material to burn. Here are 2 diagrams to describe fires. The first is called the fire triangle. It shows that we need heat, fuel, and oxygen for any fire to burn. The second is called the wildfire triangle. A wildfire needs 3 special things: fuel that can burn, weather, which is dry and windy, and topography. Topography means the shape of the land. Remember that heat rises, so fires usually go uphill much faster than they go downhill. When it's windy, the wind is stronger at the top of mountains and in the valleys between mountains. So the wind often spreads fires up hills and through valleys. The wind not only forces heat and flames in front of it, but it also sends embers long distances. Embers are small burning materials like leaves and small pieces of wood that can be blown in the wind and smoke. When these embers fall back to the ground, they can start many small fires, called spot fires. When an ember lands near your home, it can start a fire in grass that hasn't been cut, in bushes that have lots of dry, dead leaves and twigs, or on wooden furniture and cushions that have been left outside, or in leaves that are on your roof, in your rain gutters, or on the ground around your house. The embers can also enter homes through open doors and windows, or through the vents that are needed around your home for foundations and attics. Embers are the main causes of houses burning during a wildfire. As climate change warms our planet, wildfire conditions are getting worse. Over time, the average yearly temperature is higher and climbing. Changing climate also affects weather patterns. We're experiencing longer periods without rain, and many trees are dying due to drought. Our fire season is now 2 months longer than before. Many parts of our landscaping are drying out, and this makes the trees and bushes more likely to burn. When we have more strong wind days, all we need is a spark and a wildfire can start, which is hard to put out. Understanding wildfires helps us to live with a natural part of our ecology. We need them to keep our forests in balance, but we also need to understand fire's behavior to know how to protect ourselves and our homes.
The video we just watched explains the science behind wildfires. Many people mistakenly believe that wildfires sweep through communities as a mass of flames, exploding homes as they pass. You have learned that embers are the primary source of home ignition. In fact, up to 90% of homes are destroyed by embers. Let's talk a little bit more about wildfire science and then see how it applies to your work. You'll probably remember the two fire triangles. The one on the left shows that fuel, oxygen, and heat are what produce fire. But wildfires behave a little bit differently. They need fuel, but the topography, the shape of the land, hills and valleys have a big impact on how they behave. And finally, I think we all know that dry, windy conditions make wildfires spread much more rapidly. So once again, what is the main cause of homes burning during wildfires? As we can see here, it's embers. Look how those embers land in the vegetation, which is right next to homes. It's really your job as landscape professionals to help homeowners make good decisions about what kinds of plants to put in those areas and to make sure that they are properly maintained so that the homes are not going to be ignited by burning vegetation right next to the home. So how does the shape of the land affect landscaping decisions? I'll give you a minute to think about this. As we can see here, fire is spreading rapidly up this hill. Unfortunately, that slope is very poorly maintained. The vegetation is large, it's very dry, it's very overgrown. It's the perfect fuels in a terrible situation on a slope, and you can see how they allow the fire to spread rapidly towards that home. Plants and trees must be properly spaced on slopes. Rising heat means that vegetation must be spread further apart on steeper terrain. So how does climate change impact your landscape decisions? We know the temperatures are rising. That contributes to a longer fire season. It's at least 2 months longer than it used to be. Vegetation dries out more with those rising temperatures. Weather patterns are reducing the amount of rain that we're getting, and oftentimes creating windier conditions. So we need to think and keep those ideas in mind when we're making choices about what to plant and how to plant it and how to maintain it. Now we're going to talk about defensible space. Our next video once again features Battalion Chief Todd Lando, who's going to discuss some of the mistaken ideas that people have about defensible space and the vegetation right near your home.
I want to illustrate it and bring it to the practical level for homeowners, give you some tips, some ideas of what you can look for and how you can make changes around your home. The first 5 feet is really illustrated right here. We're talking about the surface, the ground, the area right around the outside walls of your house. And we've got a lot of information on home hardening. We've got information on defensible space, landscaping, plant selection. All of these things tie together. They're all important. None of them stand alone. But I really think that we've learned that this zone 0, this first 5 feet, is the most critical place for you to pay attention to. And what I like is that it's also the easiest place for homeowners to take action. So recap here. Most homes are going to ignite from embers. I'm going to show you a couple images that will help you understand what we're talking about when we refer to embers. This is video from a police officer's dashboard cam during the campfire in 2018. You can see the intensity, the number of embers. These are embers blowing across a road. Presumably there are homes in that vicinity. This is where we tie the home itself, the home hardening work that we want you all to do with zone 0 in this area around the exterior of the house. That 6 inches closest to the ground, the separation between the ground, and in this case, you can even see leaf litter on the ground, and the combustible wood shingle siding. That's the critical 6 inches. Our goal is to keep the fire from spreading from the ground to the structure itself, and creating that separation. In this case, it's 6 inches of exposed foundation that separates the place where the embers will accumulate and the siding itself. Very important. This is an example image from a home in Marin County. This is a home. I apologize that I'm not backed up farther in the image, but what you see here is non-combustible siding. This is hardy shingles with a ember and fire resistant vent, a Vulcan brand vent, and a concrete pathway around the exterior of the house. You're going to see more images from this in a second. So those things tie together that the structure, or separate the structure from zone 0. And as we've already covered, mulch. Your choice in mulch within 5 feet of the structure is absolutely critical. This is an image of a gorilla hair, shredded redwood or shredded cedar type mulch, very commonly used. It's has its purpose in certain situations, but this material does not belong adjacent to your house. What we want to see for homeowners, and this is a simple change that you can make around your structure, we want to see you choose rock or gravel mulch. We want to see non-combustible, non-organic materials used as mulch immediately adjacent to the home. Wood chips or bark are out. They have their place in your yard more than 5 feet from your structure. Shredded redwood needs to be applied very carefully. It's the easiest to ignite. I always point out that that's what the Cub Scouts use to start their campfires. So you want to be very judicious with its use around your home if you live in the wildland-urban interface. Here's an image. This is from the Tubbs Fire in Santa Rosa in 2017. This is a home, bark mulch. You can see one of the homes is actually burning in the background. The other is destroyed. And you can see how easily the bark mulch around the outside of the house has ignited. We're talking myth busting tonight, defensible space. That vegetation absolutely needs to go. There's no doubt about it. That's a poor choice in vegetation. But that's not all that defensible space is. The choice in vegetation is one small aspect of creating defensible space. Defensible space is not just about the plants. It's about the design. It's about the way you maintain that landscape. It's about the features that you build into your landscape, the permanent features, not just the plants. This is a great photograph just 2 years ago at the Kincaid Fire in Sonoma County, showing very clearly how a landscaping feature, in this case a retaining wall, is helping direct heat away from the house. We hear from people all the time that defensible space, creating defensible space, improving their landscaping is gonna ruin their landscaping. They don't want to see the change in their landscaping. One of the best examples we've seen of a transformation in a yard. Here's the before photo. Here's the after photo. Same photo, same angle. The issues that this homeowner were confronted with were an old wooden staircase that was attached to the house, several inches of bark mulch, a bamboo hedge towards the back of the house and along the side of the house, a dead tree in the yard, and frankly, some areas that weren't landscaped, weren't particularly attractive, which changed to this: attractive use of succulents, use of decorative gravel within 5 feet of the structure. Again, we're not asking anybody to clear all of the vegetation in their yard, but we want people to know that a defensible space, again, not just about the landscaping or the vegetation in your yard, the landscaping features, the other features, the combustible materials in your yard can have just as big an impact on whether your home's going to survive. In this case, a fence. We've talked at length about the importance of protecting fences, making sure that fences are not attached to your structure. This is a great example of a yard that has fantastic defensible space in most senses, but that fence carried the fire directly to the home. This is probably the big one, the mother of all myths. My neighbor's tree is an extreme fire hazard. I have an inbox full of messages that say just that. People write to us, they call us, they're concerned about their neighbor's tree, oftentimes concerned about their own trees. We want people to look down, not necessarily up, when they're thinking about their defensible space. This is a photograph of the Scripps Ranch community in Southern California. This is a neighborhood that was surrounded by eucalyptus trees. Every home had trees in their side yard, their front yard, and their backyard, and every tree survived. None of the homes survived. This gets to the point we make often, that your homes are most vulnerable to embers. The defensible space is not harmful to the environment, although there is a myth floating around that creating defensible space creates harm to animals, plants, insects, and the landscape. This is not the case. You can have a healthy native landscape that's lush, well-maintained, and fire resilient. Myth: defensible space means cutting down trees. This is not the case. Again, we're not talking about the trees when we talk about defensible space, at least not the canopies of them. We want you to look towards the ground. We want you to look at the space around those trees. We want you to maintain a healthy natural forest around your property. This is a community that was losing their native oak woodlands to invasive species like French broom, Scotch broom, and acacia. By restoring the meadow that normally had surrounded these oak trees, they're restoring the health of the native oak forest, and they're improving their fire resiliency. The myth is defensible space means my house fend itself. The defensible and defensible space refers to firefighters. Defensible space as a concept goes back decades, and it really goes back to creating a space that's safe for firefighters to operate. It creates a space around a home where firefighters can protect the home, the firefighters do the defending, and the defensible space makes it safe for them to do that. In California, there are a variety of laws and codes and ordinances that address defensible space, and they address the defensible space around your home in using this theory of zones. Zone 0 to 5 feet, is going to be addressed by a new law, a change to California Public Resources Code that'll come into effect starting this year and be phased in over the next 3 years. And that's going to address a number of items that we know now are extremely important to the survival of your home, the combustibles within 5 feet of your walls. Zone 1, 5 feet to 30 feet, is a space where the CAL FIRE and the state law addresses it directly as the lean, clean, and green zone. This is an area where we want to see no dead vegetation at all. Grasses must be cut to 3 inches or less. Trees need to be limbed up 6 feet from the ground or a third the height of the tree. And we want to see spacing put between shrubs and plants. From 30 to 100 feet, the law requires that you provide basic maintenance, not removal of trees, removal of dead vegetation only. You don't necessarily, under the law, need to cut your dry grasses from 30 to 100 feet, although we strongly recommend that. When we look at this in relation to how homes actually ignite, I'm going to close with this. It's a reminder that 60 to 90% of homes lost during wildfires ignite from the embers that land on them or within 5 feet of them. There's nothing in the current law that addresses this issue. So when we talk about defensible space, when we talk about defensible space as a law, when we look at it as a law enforcement issue, we're really focusing on 10% of the homes that are lost during wildfires. But it's important to note that 100% of the homes that don't have defensible space are vulnerable during a wildfire.
You can see that creating defensible space is critical for protecting homes from wildfires. The most important area is named Zone 0, the first 5 feet around the home. There should be nothing in this area that could be ignited by burning embers. Here's what you need to know about creating defensible space. Let's talk about mulches. Maintaining a non-combustible, ignition-resistant area immediately adjacent to the house and other structures is very important. Is the gorilla hair bark mulch a good choice? No, it's very flammable. The same can be said for the pine needles. However, using organic composting mulches is very important, and they're a good way to retain moisture in the soil so plants don't perish. Stone or gravel is okay. However, stone or gravel, though very attractive, needs to be applied with some caution because the stone and gravel can retain heat and contribute to moisture loss in the soil. Take a look at these photos for a minute. What are some of the improvements that we can see between the before and after pictures? Can you find at least 3 things that have changed for the better? I'll give you a minute to think about it. So probably the first thing that jumps out of us is that those older wooden stairs and that little decking, which was right next to the house, all of which can easily catch on fire, it's no longer there. In fact, it's been replaced by a very attractive gravel mulch with stone pavers. If you look towards the back of the property, you'll see on the before picture that there was a stand of bamboo up there. Bamboo is very flammable. It's been removed, and it's been replaced with a very attractive orange tree. If you look to the left of the photo on the left, you can see that there was more bamboo. So once again, they removed bamboo every place they possibly could. And then finally, we see some well-irrigated green succulent vegetation, which has been planted in the stone, above the stones on the right-hand side of the picture there. These are all very good ideas for making a fire-smart garden. Here's some very dramatic photos. Take a hard look at them. What do you notice? What's different? What's unusual? When we look at the photo on the left, we'll see that there's a lot of eucalyptus trees behind these homes which have been totally destroyed. Many homeowners are very worried about eucalyptus trees. But we can see here, when those homes were burning, that was creating a lot of heat. But the eucalyptus trees are not destroyed. If you look even more closely at the photo, you will in fact notice that many of the trees, which grew very close to those homes, are still intact and not burned. In fact, the homes were destroyed by embers which landed in vulnerable areas close to the homes, or in some cases entered the homes through poorly screened vents, open windows, and so forth. Trees certainly do need to be maintained, but trees are not the primary source of the destruction of homes. We can see the same thing at the photo on the right. That home is completely leveled from wildfire, but look at all of those trees which are right behind the home, and all of them are still green and intact. So we learned that there are 4 defensible space zones. We've just talked quite a bit about Zone 0, the first 5 feet around the home. That does not need to be bare earth, but we need to make sensible choices. Gravel mulches, smaller succulent plants, properly sized, properly spaced. Zone 1, 5 to 30 feet, is the more typical garden area. Once again, we want to make good choices about plants, make sure that they're spread apart, oftentimes broken up by what we call hardscape, which would be stones or gravel paths and so forth in between them, and of course properly maintained. Zone 2 is 30 to 100 feet. Oftentimes these are areas where we start running into slopes and hillsides or larger, taller grasses. These areas need to be maintained. We'll learn more about this in the next video that we're going to see, but we do need to think once again about proper spacing of plants and make sure that those grasses are mowed and that the plants that we choose are the appropriate size for those areas. The last beyond 100 feet area is usually where we get into publicly owned lands that we often call open space areas. Although homeowners are not responsible for those lands, it may be important to the homeowner that some maintenance is done in the first 10 feet or so in those areas. That's allowed by the codes in Marin County here. And so that's oftentimes a good way to protect backyard fences and so forth. So we just talked a little bit about the importance of creating defensible space. Now let's think about how to create fire-smart landscapes. I think we have a very good video by University of California Marin Master Gardener Faye Mark. Let's see what Faye has to say.
Hi, I'm Faye Mark from the University of California Marin Master Gardeners. Today I'm going to show you how to create and maintain a beautiful fire-smart landscape. Most traditional residential landscapes include foundation plantings and large trees and shrubs near the house. We're used to this look, but it turns out there are better ways of organizing your landscape that may help protect your home when a wildfire is burning nearby. We're often asked the question, what are the safest plants? Truth is, all plants burn. When it comes to fire-smart landscaping, it's much more important to consider where a plant is situated and how it is maintained than to assume some plants are better than others. The area within 5 feet of your house is the most critical. During a wildfire, embers can travel long distances. They tend to collect near the base of a home's exterior walls and will ignite anything that burns. To avoid that, we recommend minimizing anything that can burn in this area, including wood mulch and plants. This also means moving items like firewood, lumber, patio furniture, and garbage cans. Clearing this area of combustibles is like creating a force field that defends your home against fire. This is a whole new way to think about landscaping since many of our homes have plantings right up against the walls and foundation. Just take it step by step. Start by removing plants in front of sliding glass doors or windows and remove any wood mulch. Next, focus on taller plants under eaves and vines climbing on your house. Low-growing or ground-hugging plants are less likely to cause a problem. Just be sure they're well hydrated and free of dead or dry material. Beyond 5 feet from the house, it's all about maintenance. The goal is to create defensible space that acts as a buffer between your house and your garden. It means looking at your garden with slightly different eyes. First, you want to interrupt the path of a fire by creating horizontal and vertical spacing between plants. That sounds complicated, but it's really not. You can create horizontal space by adding stepping stones, paths, patios, or walls. Any non-combustible surface between plantings helps stop the path of a fire. They can be as simple as gravel paths or as complicated as a low stone wall. The idea is to think of your planting beds as clumps or islands, with non-combustible surfaces providing separation to keep a fire from spreading along the ground. Vertical spacing is about stopping fire ladders. Fire ladders are when fire from lower plants spreads to nearby taller plants. If you stroll through your garden, are there places where shrubs are close to low tree canopies? If so, try to create space between them. Limb up trees and keep shrubs pruned. It's an easy and important way of interrupting a fire's path. The density of plantings provides another clue about how a fire could travel through your garden. You want to have a little breathing space in your garden. Consider breaking up hedges and large swaths of uninterrupted plantings to stop fire in its tracks. Another good rule of thumb is to keep low-growing plants closer to the house and taller plants away from the house. Second, you want to reduce your garden's fuel load. This is a fancy way of saying keep your garden cleaned up. Anything that burns is fuel for a fire. Diseased, dried, or overgrown trees and shrubs have more fuel than well-pruned trees and shrubs. So do weeds, leaves, and pine needles in roof gutters, and debris that's gathered under decks. Keep things cleaned up to starve fire of fuel. As we like to say, don't be fuelish. Don't worry, you don't need to pick up every last leaf on the ground. Just be on the lookout for excess fuel, being extra vigilant the closer you are to your home or other built structures. Do you see plant material that would be useful for starting a campfire? If so, that's probably a good clue that it needs to be removed. Step into your garden and look up. Do you see tree branches near the roof line? Try to keep branches 10 feet from your roof or chimney, and definitely not touching the walls of your house. That way you'll avoid a buildup of needles and leaves on your roof and your rain gutters. Are there any diseased, dead, or dried shrubs or trees that need to be pruned or removed? Now look down. Are paths clear of debris? Do plants look healthy and hydrated? Plants that are properly hydrated are more resistant to fire and to pests and diseases. Even some drought-resistant plants may need a little supplemental water during extended dry periods. What about mulch? A layer of mulch improves soil quality, regulates soil temperature, reduces weeds, and helps retain water. Use non-combustible mulches like stone or gravel within 5 feet of any structure, including decks and sheds. Further out, choose larger, composted wood chips and avoid applying mulch greater than 2 inches deep. Now let's talk about choosing plants, a favorite topic for master gardeners. We recommend plants that don't need much water, are easy to maintain, and that contribute to the ecological health of the surrounding area. We also suggest avoiding plants that are messy or invasive, like ivy and pampas grass, meaning they grow or spread so fast it's hard to keep them under control. Remember, you're trying to reduce your fuel load. Start by assessing your garden's growing conditions, such as sun exposure and climate, and then select plants that thrive in that environment. In other words, choose the right plant for the right place. Don't worry, we have tools to help you with that. Just visit the UC Marin Master Gardener website to learn more. We even have plant lists that you can print and take to the nursery. We also have demonstration gardens where you can check out dozens of plants firsthand that are beautiful, colorful, and suitable for our Marin microclimates. Visit us at the Falkirk Cultural Center in San Rafael and at Harvey's Garden at Blackie's Pasture in Tiburon. That's it. Thanks for joining me, and congratulations on taking the first step towards creating a gorgeous, thriving, fire-smart landscape. Happy gardening!
You are probably often asked, what are the safest plants? Well, as Faye said, the fact is, all plants can burn. Fire-smart landscaping involves choosing the right plants, making sure that they're correct size. As we know, homeowners are often attracted to something that looks very good when it's small, but once it's planted, it starts going from 1 foot to a 10-foot monstrosity that is not the right size for the area. Where the plants are placed and how far apart they're spaced is very important, and of course, all of this requires a lot of maintenance. So how do we place plants to stop fires from spreading? What we see on the left is the need to space plants apart horizontally. This is a very good example of using hardscape, the gravel mulch, to separate plants to prevent fire from spreading from plant to plant to plant. Vertical spacing is also important. If you notice, there are no low-lying branches in those trees. They have been pruned up, and the plants underneath the trees are small-sized and grouped into little islands so that even if there were a fire in those areas, it's not going to spread up to the trees. Hardscaping and plant islands are a very good way to create plant separation. The home on the left is very typical of Marin County. You can see the wooded oak hillsides with grasslands on there. And of course, oftentimes we see the rising slope behind the home and back. I wouldn't necessarily have chosen that as the best mulch for that area, but I really like the way the plants are spread apart. Breaking up the area with the steps in there is also positive. Point out one other thing. You see an Italian cypress tree or two behind the fence in that property. That's also not a good landscaping choice for a property. Those are very flammable. On the right-hand side is just an excellent example of using large rocks and mulch and little pathways with clumped islands of plantings to create separation between plants, and again, keeping them at the right size to avoid wildfire from shooting through that area. So what is the correct spacing for planting on a slope? When we look at shrubs, if they're on a flat area, they should be at least twice the size of the plant in distance apart. As we go up the slope, and this is the important part, they need to be spread further apart. In fact, the further up you go, the farther apart they need to be. The same principle applies to trees. Closer together when we're on them flat, spread further apart as they go up the hillside to prevent the heat from the fire from spreading from tree to tree to tree. So pruning trees requires the creation of vertical clearance. If you have a tree that's in a flat area, between the ground and the tree, you need at least 6 feet of clearance. When you have shrubs planted next to trees, particularly if they're on slopes, you have to be aware that that will require the tree to be pruned higher. So you really need to go 3 times the height of the shrub. So the bigger the shrub, farther up you need to prune the tree to make sure that if that shrub catches on fire, it will not spread up in the trees. Let's take a look at 3 pictures to give good examples of maintenance needs. The picture on the left is very typical. People plant these kinds of hedges and shrubs right next to the home to hide the foundation of the home. The problem with this is that although these hedges can oftentimes look very green on the outside, in fact, inside is loaded with dead material here. This one's exposed here. Oftentimes these look green, and what happens is the embers come in, they pass right through all that green material because it's not as flammable, and they land in all that dry material inside the bush. Once that catches on fire, even the green material dries out and burns rapidly, and when it's right up next to the home like that, you're going to have the home catch on fire. This is not something that can be maintained properly. This simply needs to be removed. If you have hedges, they need to be much farther away from the home. The photo in the middle is another very typical landscaping problem. When you look at the front of the house, first of all, you notice that those larger shrubs are juniper. Juniper is very flammable. Contributing to the problem is the fact that they have become very large. You can see they're right up to the eaves of the home. And lastly, you can see that there is wood mulch, relatively flammable, right underneath all of that. So if we have embers coming into a collection of vegetation like this, it's going to catch on fire. It's going to look like your typical burning Christmas tree. Not only is the home going to catch on fire, but if you'll notice, this is right next to the exit from the home. making it difficult to leave the home if those catch on fire. Once again, this is not something that just can be maintained. This really needs to be removed, and new plantings need to be put in that area. The third picture shows leaves on a roof. As landscapers, you may not necessarily think about the leaves on the roof, but this is an optional service you might want to consider providing to the resident. These leaves, in fact, make the home very vulnerable to wildfire. Embers will come in, they'll catch the leaves on fire, and they'll get under the roof. The fire will be inside the home before you know it, and the home will be burned right to the ground. So you might want to consider offering the service of blowing those leaves out there to try to keep those gutters clean. Maintenance is obviously critical for fire safety. It's very important to remove dead leaves and twigs which accumulate under shrubs like we're doing in the raking there. And then all dead vegetation needs to be pruned and removed. One of the first things you notice in this garden is the use of the stone pathway to create horizontal spacing between the plantings. There's also in the foreground an attractive gravel feature, which contrasts with the stones, but also creates separation. The plantings themselves, as you notice, are not right up next to the foundation of the home. They're relatively low in size. There's an attractive variety to them, and they're spread out very nicely. On the other side of the stone pathway, once again, you see spacing of the plants. There's some very good use of hardscaping there. You see some of the larger boulders in the background. And at the base of the hillside, more boulders. As we move up the hillside, one of the first things you notice is that there's no high-growing grasses there. The trees have been limbed up very appropriately, and they've been spread out as they go up the slope. All in all, there's many features here that help reduce fire spread. Here's a checklist of some things that we could think about that should all be done to reduce the risk of wildfires. We have a homeowner's guide to wildfire preparedness in Marin that you can share with the homeowner. I'll get to that in a minute. You should be removing dead grasses, weeds, plants, and foliage. Remove the fallen leaves, needles, twigs, barks, cones, and small branches. Remove the combustibles around and under decks and awnings. They are particularly vulnerable to creating wildfires from ember spread. Remove the branches that overhang the roof or within 10 feet of chimneys. Trim the trees up at least 6 feet. 10 feet is oftentimes even better. And choose fire-resistant plants, and please keep them well irrigated and well maintained. This is the homeowner's guide I was talking about. This is available to you from the NorCal Landscape Association, or you can get copies from Fire Safe Marin. It's very instructive. It has great photos inside, and it really will help you to be able to explain to homeowners what choices they should be making about plants, why they should be placed in certain places, and how they should be maintained. As landscape professionals, you can create and maintain a beautiful fire-smart landscape. Fire-smart landscapings are attractive. If we take a look at the home on the left there, very typical of what we find here, a home built on a slope. You can see that we have hardscaping, we have the rocks, we have the gravel in there. The plants are nicely spread out in there, and it's all maintained very well. There's lots of examples on the right-hand photos in there, again, of the combination between smart choices in plants and hardscaping to make a very beautiful, very attractive garden setting. I want to thank all of you for participating in this course. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions or need any follow-up on anything, you can always contact us at firesafemarin.org or work with the Northern California Landscape Contractors Association. Thank you again for your time.